The issue is this, I think in an attempt to calm public fears, you're hearing things like it's a mild illness, this is like flu. It's not really the case because this is an unusual virus. For many young people especially, it is a mild illness, but we're seeing some devastating things. And we got a heads up about this from the Chinese. They actually informed us, and we knew it was coming. Nursing homes. Look what this virus did in that nursing home in Kirkland, Washington. It rolled through it like a train, right? It's at least 7 deaths so far in a nursing home of about 100 people. So this is like the angel of death for older individuals. We need to go back and support all of our nursing home. I don't know what we're doing wrong, but clearly that nursing home is not prepared for this, and I'm going to guess nursing home across Oklahoma's are not prepared as well. Also, our healthcare providers. We saw in Wuhan 1,000 healthcare providers got sick, and we had at least 15% severely ill and in ICUs. And that is very dangerous because not only do you subtract those people out of the healthcare workforce, but the demoralizing effect of colleagues taking care of colleagues is going to be devastating. I mean, the whole thing can fall apart if that starts to happen. We saw this with Dallas. So I was on Governor Perry's task force for infectious disease, and those 2 ICU nurses, when they got sick, it was really devastating. And finally, the governor had to call the Health and Human Services Secretary, CDC director, said, look, normal ICUs can't take care of these patients. We've got to get them out of here. So you don't want to see those kinds of situations. I'm worried about our first responders. We're already seeing in Washington State how they're already in quarantine. So does that mean we're going to have to bring in the National Guard? I think that's going to be another big issue as well. So those are the 3 vulnerabilities that I see right now in a place like Oklahoma.
And how should our constituents back home react to that, the average JQ public out there?
Well, I think the average GQ public needs to hear from its elected leaders, from the governor, from the public health authorities on what the plan is. I mean, don't just get up there and say this is a flu, this is a mild illness. One, it's not true, and people in Oklahoma are pretty smart and they'll figure that out pretty quickly. And second, explain what the risks are. These are the 3 vulnerable populations that we have to worry about, and here are the steps that we're doing to mitigate that. That's what people will appreciate.
Dr. Murray, as you mentioned in your opening statement, approximately.
This virus is much worse than you can possibly imagine, ladies and gentlemen. And ever since the beginning of this outbreak in Wuhan, it just looked like the worst case scenario. They were locking everything down. It looked like it escaped the lab. It's just beyond words. And, now they're acting like they're on top of the situation, or they've just been made aware that they did everything that they could. But instead, they've known for well over a month, 2 months even, that this was coming. And they're just now starting to prepare the public with, bullshit wash your hands campaigns. You're seeing that everywhere. This is an airborne virus. And to see them come out there and be like, just wash your hands as they smirk at you, it's rather ridiculous. And then they tell you, like, don't get a mask, just wash your hands. And you see them all basically, wearing the level 4 gear from head to toe. And they're like, oh, no. Just wash your hands. Don't worry. There's a very sad truth that they're not telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen. This virus is so infectious that it spreads, in ways you can't even imagine. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that it doubles in size every 3 to 7 days, probably more like 3. And what we're learning now from hearings today, there was a very interesting Senate hearing on Homeland Security, and it was just about this virus. And there were like 7,000 people came in during the epidemic directly from Wuhan. And they could only track about 25% of them. They knew that day one that, this outbreak was inevitable. And they did nothing. They did nothing except pretend like it wasn't coming. And what we're learning is that, in fact, it doesn't double every 3 days. It multiplies by a factor of 5 or more every 3 days. And if you do the math with 7,000 seeds blowing in, you multiply that by 5, you get 35,000 in just 3 days. You multiply that by 5, you're like at 175,000. You multiply that by 5, you're over 1 million in like 9 days. Now, these didn't all land in the same city. And so, we're going to get different, expressions of that equation, but in every city. And it's now starting to light up, pretty much on schedule. Mid-January, we're like, it took the Chinese 2 months to go from basically 0 cases to full meltdown. Mid-January, we're like 2 months. That's what we got. It's now the 5th of March. We're 10 days away from the full destruction of America. And they've known this for 2 months, and they chose to do nothing. Instead, they just let all of these planes in, more of them. And they didn't tell anybody. They didn't contain, the issue. And they just made it worse. Exponentially worse. And now, the whole world is basically going to crash and burn before our very eyes. And it'll be interesting to see, what's left, if anything, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister of the UK came on the morning television circuit, and it was so bad. I mean, he's literally smirking at you as he's telling you to wash your hands and everything's going to be fine, that they're not hiding anything, that they're not, trying to put the public in danger. You have to hear this for yourself. And then we'll get into the latest updates, and there are many updates to cover. Let's see, where's the video guy? Ladies and gentlemen, how's everybody doing out there? We're broadcasting live on the Screw Tube. Let's see if we can communicate.
Now, overnight, the government has faced fresh allegations of withholding information about the coronavirus after it was revealed that health officials will stop providing daily updates on the location of any new infections.
But with the known number of UK cases now standing at 90, should we be doing more? And surely we have a right to know if there's an outbreak in our area.
Well, joining us now to answer those questions is the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Good morning, Prime Minister. Thank you for coming in today. You must be a very busy man at the moment. Are you withholding information?
No, not at all. Let me clear that up immediately, because it's very important that we are transparent. People understand that we're transparent. Public Health England needs to be absolutely sure about the diagnoses of these cases. So what they're doing is they're immediately identifying the region where they think there's an incidence, and then within 24 hours confirming the exact location to be sure that we've got the right thing.
So why will it be the end of the week when we find out?
Because we're building up a map, a proper database that the public can access, showing the whole thing in real time.
Isn't it better if we all have all the information straight away? I mean, we're not stupid, we can handle the truth. So
Absolutely.
Tell us the truth, tell us straight away.
Exactly, and I think one of the great things about the British public is we can all see very clearly what the balance of risk is. We can see where this is happening and the rate at which it's spreading. So I'm with you, and we're putting it all out there, and that's.
I just worry because we know who the vulnerable are, whether it's elderly or those with underlying other respiratory conditions and things like that. If you have the information, then you might not decide to go shopping in that area because you know the risk. But if you don't know for a week, you might be making unnecessary decisions.
I need to know.
Everybody needs to know where this virus is. And they're like, well, look, we're going to tell you by the end of the week where these cases are. We're building a map, right? We let these planes in, we let this thing spread, and now we're just even buying more time. It's not bad enough. They're buying more time because they just want, the free fall to be so hardcore that people just won't care anymore about whose fault it is. They'll just be worried about, where to get the next bowl of rice or, ramen noodles. And there's a lot of people that are going to get, smoked because of this one way or another, whether it be the virus, whether it be the medical martial law, whether it be the riots, the food riots, and the like. But this gets even more rich. We're going to continue on with this interview with the Prime Minister of the UK, because you can tell he's just smirking and buying time. And, the hosts here kind of know, and they're trying to, put him in a bad spot. And it's, it's almost like they're just having fun with each other. But to, Johnson's credit here, he was like, everybody knows where this is going. And so if you can read between the lines, I mean, you should already be stocked up, locked and loaded, waiting for the apocalypse, basically, writing it out in your arc. And we'll get back into that in the latest updates, but we're just going to play a couple more minutes of this riveting interview and just try to, gain some insight. And pay attention to how now everybody's classifying this as a disease. It's not just a virus. It's like AIDS. It's like an STD. And once you catch it, it never goes away. It's like the perpetual, hardcore mnemonic flu that keeps working you, thrashing your lungs over and over again. It's, this is basically a death sentence for the world. This is a doomsday virus. And we're going to get into the relapses. We're going to get into a big story of, a case that was cleared from the hospital saying they were recovered. And basically 5 days later, the dude was dead. And, we'll get into all of that. Let's just, save it for the rest of the story.
For the overwhelming majority of people, this is going to be, who get it, this is going to be a mild to moderate illness. And, we're still at the stage where the single best thing we can do, and we'll be like that for a long time, is just wash our hands.
Well, this is your this is what you're putting out.
Fantastic.
Putting out at the moment.
Video.
It's very simple. It couldn't really be more simple than wash your hands. And
well, it's for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
20 seconds, which, as you've said, happy birthday
water,
twice, hot water.
Hot water and
so this is the video running through now that we're watching.
And what you don't want is for people to sort of do this for a couple of days and then get bored and kind of forget and go back to normal life, because we've all sort of done it. We've all got red raw hands and sore hands.
Yeah, I just washed mine just now.
Exactly. Well, I hope you did.
I'm glad, because
I did.
You did come straight in here, and I kept my hands by my side just to see what happened, and you walked in and you shook my hand very boldly.
I did. That's right. And I've been going around hospitals, as you can imagine, and I think you always shake hands. And people make their own decisions, but washing them is the single most effective thing, rather than sort of barring all forms of.
So you'd wash your hands
human.
before you shook mine.
I washed my hands.
Definitely.
My advice to everybody is wash your hands at all times.
So now you launched your battle plan, where you
Yes.
cross live to you at Downing Street and on Tuesday to listen, contain, delay, research and mitigate. And Professor Chris Whitty, who is England's Chief Medical Officer, has said now that we are mainly in the delay phase. So we've moved from contain into delay.
Let me explain exactly. Let me explain what's happening today. So, as people know, the numbers continue to grow. I mean, not exponentially, but they're continuing to grow. So the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, or SAGE, is meeting, and they will consider a range of options that we have to try to delay the spread. And they range from things like stopping big public gatherings, sporting gatherings and so on, closing schools, that sort of thing, quite draconian stuff, to more targeted interventions, which would be really helping the elderly.
Italy's done that, so how close are we to doing that?
So, well, we'll see what the scientists advise. That's the best thing I find, that these guys are brilliant. And they're epidemiologists who understand behavioral psychology of the population. They understand how these things spread. So we're going to see what they say. But just for your guidance and for everybody to think about, at the moment, what they're telling me is that actually, slightly counterintuitively, things like closing schools and stopping big gatherings don't work as well, perhaps, as people think in stopping the spread. That's what they're saying to me at the moment. So our advice on school closures remains pretty much where it was, I mean, exactly where it was, which is that we don't think at the moment that schools should be closing, but unless, of course, there is an incidence unless there are cases in the school, in which case they should obviously talk to Public Health England.
Is the delay essentially trying to spread this out so that it doesn't all happen at once and overwhelm the NHS, and that you can actually delay it into perhaps the summer when it's a little quieter and the ordinary flu might have died down a wee bit? Is that what you're doing?
It's a very, very important question, and that's where a lot of the debate has been. And one of the theories is that, perhaps you could sort of take it on the chin, take it all in one go, and allow the disease, as it were, to move through the population. Without really taking as many draconian measures, I think we need to strike a balance. I think it's very important. We've got a fantastic NHS. We'll give them all the support that they need. We'll make sure that they have all the preparations, all the kit that they need for us to get through it. But I think it would be better if we take all the measures that we can now just to stop the peak of the disease being as difficult for the NHS as it might be. I think there are things that we may be able to do.
You say that the NHS has your full support, but according to a report from the National Audit Office, the NHS currently does not have the nursing staff it needs, despite efforts to boost the workforce. There are still 43,000 vacancies. How are they going to find beds and staff to cope with what we potentially could see an increase of patients?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into it. We, of course, have greatly increased the number of nurses in the NHS, and many more than there were in 2010, for instance. But you're right, and that's why we're recruiting 50,000 more.
That's still not fast enough.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you for it. I mean, you're right. And but we're going as fast as we possibly can. Remember, we shortened the visa application process. We've restored the bursary for nurses, so that the real incentives now to get into nursing. And in the course of the next few weeks, we will really do everything to make sure that the NHS is able to cope.
Bringing back, and because there was talk of people who were in retirement, to bring them back, and we looked at that and thought, hold on a second, if you start bringing back people into the front line of medical health, they're actually the most vulnerable. They're the older people because they're retired.
Well, that's obviously something we'd have to consider, and you're absolutely right that in principle over 65s are more vulnerable to.
So how was that ever going to work?
Well, I mean, couple of points. I'm not sure how many over 65s we're actually going to be recruiting. But secondly, don't forget that...
Anyways, I think you probably get the idea. Did you see how high his hand went when he was talking about the peak of the epidemic? You could spend all day on the micro expressions and, what they're really trying to say, or what they just accidentally let slip, ladies and gentlemen. So this truly is the worst case scenario. We saw a specialist testify before Congress in the opening video, where he was talking about this virus being like an angel of death and just, like a runaway train running people over. And, what we've seen in the videos, leading up to this event from China was that this was, an absolute nightmare, not to be, underestimated, not to be, ignored, right? And you heard the Prime Minister Johnson, must be my evil twin, basically say, well, now they're looking to ramp up, and everybody, in testimonies today or in hearings today was like, yeah, we're going to need time to ramp up. It's going to take us time to, do this and do that. And, we need more time. We need more time. And it's like for the last month and a half, we've been like red alert, DEFCON 1, send the subs into the deep. We just got nuked, with this weapon. And, at first, people understood. And then the censorship came in. And then it was like they're just spinning it like it doesn't matter. And they ignored it for well over a month, just like all of the other, things out there that have been bothering people, plaguing people, if you will, like the 5G, like, the fluoride, the vaccines. Speaking of vaccines, it's come out that it's going to be at least a year. And it doesn't matter anyways because everybody's infected with this thing. Everybody's got this airborne AIDS now. And it's worse than just AIDS, because AIDS, won't kill you directly. This virus, does it all. It basically does it all. And we're learning that it attacks the nervous system. It attacks muscles, especially the heart. So it causes all sorts of, hidden stealth damage while people are suffering through the pneumonia stage. And, the way this thing replicates, it's basically made to infect an entire country in about 30 days. And by the time the first cases, start hitting the hospitals, everybody's been infected. And then the hospitals go down because they've been infected. And then the police go down because they've been infected. The firefighters go down because they've been infected. The National Guard goes down because they've been infected. Infrastructure goes down. Everything will go black, basically. And, unless we're, misunderstanding the nature of this virus, it looks like this is a death sentence for just about everybody eventually. And we'll get into that. All of the recovered cases in China right now are no longer able to leave quarantine. They all stay in quarantine now. And we're getting all sorts of reports of relapses. People that were once cured now all of a sudden drop dead because of it. More and more reports. And so we're going to get into those reports. We're going to get into the latest updates, what the numbers are. It's growing exponentially. It's accelerating. And right now, the cases outside of China are, 10 times worse than they are inside of China. So we'll just try and figure out what the video guy is doing here. It looks like there's an issue. Ladies and gentlemen, there must be an issue. What is going on? Where is the video guy? There's the video guy. Let's see if we can clear up the situation. We also want to talk about this new video. This is just another example of them walling up like entire sections of the city. Talk about the the wall of China. It's everywhere now, ladies and gentlemen. But you can see that this is no joke. It's come to this. They buried people alive. They're walling up, stores and everything. They just don't want anything to function. And, they're sending people to the factories, to the death factories. But, they're just, starting to get reinfected and drop dead. And it's the worst case scenario. And I suppose the people on television are just trying to let people enjoy their final days, in peace, if you will. And here we are, just kind of like driving the last nail into the coffin. But look, there's a lot that we don't know about this disease. I'm sure there's a lot that they do know about this disease and won't tell us. We can, basically figure out much of it for ourselves based on, the reports that we're getting out there. But, from day one, it looked really, really bad. And I can't imagine anybody, with a brain bigger than a peanut, looking at these videos going, no, it's no big deal. No, let's just talk about sports. But here we are. And, I think day one we were like, I told you so isn't gonna make anybody feel better, because we knew that, this is exactly where we would end up. And all we can do now is just kind of like, prepare the best we can for what's coming. Nobody will be fully prepared. We're like walking the plank right now together. It's kind of, charming. But let's just get on with the news, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? And so here's a report. Just when the outbreak in Hubei province reportedly eased significantly, patients in several hospitals in Wuhan experienced relapses after being discharged, and some hospitals have now suspended the discharge of patients for the time being. We're getting multiple reports of that. We'll talk about that more. Of course, the Dow, took another tank. Here's another flopper, if you will, in Iran, coughing, and it's kind of like it just dooms you. Like mono plus pneumonia plus AIDS plus Ebola plus avian flu plus Hendra virus plus probably a few other things. By the time they figure out what all of the coding does for this virus, it'll be pretty much too late. Of course, cases outside of China are now 18 times higher than inside of China. So you can see the stark difference. And this is what we were talking about, early on too. Like, this is a kamikaze attack. Nobody will be able to contain this virus like the people that built it. They knew what was coming. They knew what they had to do, and nobody else would take it seriously until it was way, way, way too late. And, and so it's like, a sneak attack. And they, they're going to stick with their story. Oh, it just came out of the seafood market, which was like 300 yards away from their weapons lab. Yeah, of course, the seafood market, not the weapons lab. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. But look, the Chinese released it, and, the New World Order governments collectively let it come in like migrants. They just love strange and unusual things, coming into the country. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, there's a lot of cool people from other countries. Don't get me wrong. I'm being an ass. But, you know what I mean. And, anyways, let's just get on with the news. Supermarkets prepare for food riots as part of an emergency plan to feed the nation as panic buying strips shelves faster. And we're seeing this everywhere. And I hope you got your supplies. You had, most of the listeners of this show had, a huge head start. And as far as outsiders are concerned, nobody likes outsiders. Nobody likes people, from other places for the most part. Doesn't matter what country you go to, or even like, people that are from out of town. They used to call people like that out of towners. It's just, human nature. But that doesn't mean that they're strange and unusual. Does it, ladies and gentlemen? They're probably more usual than the strangers we find within our own country. Cases have basically doubled again in France, 423 cases. So it's, accelerating. By the end of this weekend, it'll be probably like, 1,000, 2,000 cases, and they'll be thinking about doing some draconian stuff. We'll have to see if, what happens with the lockdowns. Essentially, at first, they're going to baby step everybody into it, and so they're just going to have it be like, the Western world version of the Wuhan lockdown. People just, shelter in place, self-isolate, and the like. But it'll get worse and worse. I mean, if people in China were like barricading, people into their buildings, there's something, about this virus that we don't know about yet. And we're about to find out what the big surprise is with this drop dead, killer virus. And look, I mean, it's just so sad to think that this, is our national defense when you think about it. If people on the internet were able to pick this apart in days after the lockdown, and, and you look at the government out there and they're just still pretty much sitting there picking their ass like, oh, there's nothing we can do. You know, it's like, well, thankfully this wasn't a nuclear strike, because, what would happen then? We would just watch the mushroom clouds and just keep the missiles in the silos, But look, it's way, way too late to catch up to this thing now. There's nothing they can do now. I mean, everybody's been infected, literally. So the question is, what's actually going to happen here? And we'll get into that. But it's looking pretty grim. New York now confirms 22 cases, 11 yesterday, 22 today, doubled just like that. And it's going to keep doubling and doubling and doubling. But, these numbers are fake. They're just like, a psychological kind of preparation for what's coming. 1 case, 5 cases, 10 cases, 20 cases. Okay, but this is so far from the truth. In the hearings today, we found out that 30,000 people were quarantined through 11 airports due to, suspicious travel, if you will. And, that was, way after the lockdown. But at the height of the epidemic in Wuhan, before they locked things down publicly, 7,000 people were estimated to have flown in directly from the Wuhan airport into the United States of America. It only takes one, as we've seen with, numerous examples. 7,000 is like, unbelievable. And they're coming to be tourists or to meet people. They're not coming to self-isolate in a hotel room, right? They're going out. You know what I mean? And chances are we had some real nefarious players, that were carriers that went all the way until they dropped dead, and nobody figured it out yet. But I'm sure there's quite a few heart attacks that were actually coronavirus. And, they went everywhere. Washington, D.C., they went to visit the Pentagon, they went to visit Congress, they went to fundraisers and rallies and the works. You know what I mean? The works, ladies and gentlemen. So that's, just part of the story. But we know that the Chinese knew beginning of January, 7th of January, they had taken the decision to lock down Wuhan 2 weeks later. They were just preparing behind the scenes, getting everything in place. And when they announced, the lockdown on the 22nd or the 23rd, that was part of the script. We're not sure what the video guy is doing, but the video guy is fired. What is this? So fired, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to continue on with the news. But again, the real numbers are 7,000 people came in from like the 7th of January to the 22nd, pretty much. Directly from Wuhan. Not to mention, other cases that might have come in from Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, whatever. But 7,000 confirmed for sure. They've got the manifest. And what we're learning from insiders is that this is actually has an R0 of 6. So to be conservative, we just, applied the math, with 5. A magnitude 5 virus. 7,000 times 5 is 35,000 in the first cycle. Which is probably more like 3 to 4 days instead of like the 7 days. And that means that, just one seed, well, look, one seed in one city can blow up real quick. You can do the math, but, chances are, especially in the West Coast, there must have been, hundreds, in each major city, and probably more, But chances are all 7,000 went through San Francisco, Seattle, or Portland before, changing to something else, or LA or something like that. But the cases on, California must have been fully contaminated in less than a week, probably. But this thing has such a huge, long incubation period. And it really depends on, overall exposure, community exposure. This is a city killer. And once an entire city becomes infected, then the sewers become infected, then the viral load just skyrockets, and people start dropping dead. And, it's like gassing it. One way or another, it's like, they're gassing everybody. People are going to die of like asphyxiation or heart attack or something like that. A real gruesome, horrible death, basically. And there isn't any reason to think that anyone recovers. Most viruses stay with you forever. Some of them you'll gain immunity to, but chances are not this virus, not this Wuhan super virus that was released from a weapons lab, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue on with the news. A New Hampshire man with flu-like symptoms was asked to avoid contact with other people. Instead, he went to a party. 3 days later, he was confirmed as the state's first patient. And now a second case has been confirmed. And so you can imagine, a big house party, right? Kegger, right? Everybody in the garage or whatever, especially in the winter. Everybody's going to be in the garage, filling the keg, filling the cup, smoking their cigarettes or whatever. Everybody's infected, and that's just one dude. So real quick, you think about the way this spreads, and you say, well, maybe it it doubles or triples every few days, but potentially one guy can infect an entire stadium. One guy could infect thousands of people. And we're probably gonna find out more. We should really play this clip from this doctor again, in case you're joining us late, that testified before Congress today. It was like the science committee, if you will, and it was mostly a sham. And this is probably really like the highlight of the testimony. But let's see if we can find that for you.
Only 75% of emerging infectious diseases originate in zoonotic pathogens. You estimate there, you said 1.
Oh, there they go with their propaganda. Look at these shills. You can almost see the devil horns right there on his head, too. Shills everywhere.
The issue is this. I think in an attempt to calm public fears, you're hearing things like it's a mild illness, this is like flu. It's not really the case, because this is an unusual virus. For many young people especially, it is a mild illness, but we're seeing some devastating things. And we got a heads up about this from the Chinese. They actually informed us, and we knew it was coming. Nursing homes. Look what this virus did in that nursing home in Kirkland, Washington. It rolled through it like a train, right? It's at least 7 deaths so far in a nursing home of about 100 people. So this is like the angel of death for older individuals. We need to go back and support all of our nursing home. I don't know what we're doing wrong, but clearly that nursing home is not prepared for this, and I'm going to guess nursing home across Oklahoma's are not prepared as well. Also, our healthcare providers. We saw in Wuhan 1,000 healthcare providers got sick, and we had at least 15% severely ill and in ICUs. And that is very dangerous, because not only do you subtract those people out of the healthcare workforce, but the demoralizing effect of colleagues taking care of colleagues is going to be devastating. I mean, the whole thing can fall apart if that starts to happen. We saw this with Dallas. So I was on Governor Perry's task force for infectious disease, and those 2 ICU nurses, when they got sick, it was really devastating. And finally, the governor.
And that's another thing, you got thousands of people in just one city, nurses and doctors basically dying, trying to treat this virus, and they've got all of the gear, right? And that won't stop it. That won't stop this virus. The mask won't stop this virus. And, the higher the dose, the worse it is. And given that this is kind of like AIDS, viral load makes all the difference. And, most people are going to get infected, but you're also going to get reinfected, and you're going to auto-infect, and it's just going to, like, accumulate like a bucket, underneath a leaking faucet or something. And eventually, the bucket is going to overflow. Now you can try and drain the bucket, and we've been talking about, trying to manage this disease. There's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that we certainly do know about the way viruses work. And, people become symptomatic once, the virus load reaches a certain level. And, the entire, idea of therapy for, viruses is basically, reducing viral load. You've got antivirals, viral blockers, receptor blockers, and this, that, and the other. And that's all you can really hope to do until they, quote unquote, find a cure, which probably isn't going to happen, but, they may find drugs that let people manage it, like HIV. And, who knows what the price will be. But undoubtedly, this was an attack on, humanity, an attack on, the West. And regardless of what happens next, I mean, that's the nature of the story. And I suppose we could spend more time on that, but we'll probably leave that for another broadcast. Coronavirus outbreak, U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing. That one was, rather interesting. We posted that. Nobody really liked it, but whatever. Disturbing black rain reported falling over parts of Japan. Incinerated bodies from China falling out in Japan. So many. And this is a video from Iran. And, we basically see people become incapacitated. And, all they can do is just basically pass out. Now, you might think that this is, a homeless dude. But, supposedly this is a guy that just collapsed and just can't do anything anymore. And we get, variations of this. As far as the way people are being taken out, and it's kind of like this virus attacks like Ebola in a sense, and whatever the weakest link is in in a person, whether it be the heart or the lungs or the brain or something else. I mean, that's what'll go first. Whatever the limiting factor is in survival, that's what'll take you out. Yeah, they're building a wall. They're building walls, walling up everything. Buildings, shops. It's like, what's going on? South Korea says it's successfully treated coronavirus patient with natural oxygen. That might be one of the best ways to kind of manage the disease, is to get an oxygen bar going. So we highly recommend everybody get oxygen and whiskey. As well as, supplements. And you're going to want to get, your fair share of supplements, because fruits and vegetables may run out. So it's not, it's not something that we would usually recommend. But we can imagine that for a lot of people, supplies are going to run out fast, especially in the big cities. That's one of the worst things about living in the big cities, is that if there is a catastrophe, now you're fighting with 10 million people, trying to get a bag of rice. And whereas, in a smaller town, maybe you've only got to deal with like 10,000 people. So still a huge amount of people. But here's where it gets, another confirmation, if you will. Recovered coronavirus patient, 36, pretty young, dies of the disease 5 days after being discharged from a hospital. And so now, we've heard actually, for a couple of weeks now, that they weren't actually letting people go from these various makeshift hospitals, that they would go from like one quarantine to another quarantine, basically like post-quarantine, and not allowed to leave because they're still hot. And what happens with this disease, and this is what it is, it's a disease, people need to understand that it's not just a flu or a cold, it's a disease. And, the first acute attack of this disease is usually pneumonia-like or flu-like. And there are a lot of, viruses that kind of follow that pattern, like measles, or, there's quite a few others where it kind of starts with, a nasal infection or, kind of like a flu-like onset, and then it progresses into a systemic infection. And so, this is an airborne virus that basically comes into the body through, the mouth, the nose, the eyes, quite literally, like pink eye, conjunctivitis. It just floats into your eye and then poof, it infects your brain, as well as, the rest of the body. But in any case, no matter how it enters, even food, water, you name it, no matter how it enters, it eventually becomes a systemic infection. And, again, it's like encephalitis. It's also, like a heart attack gun. And it attacks the heart, it attacks the lungs, it attacks the nervous system, it attacks, basically the cardiovascular system in general, and, certain types of tissues, but all over the body. And it's hardcore on the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, and undoubtedly the liver. So, this is a very nasty, never-ending infection that just keeps, whittling away at its victim. And it can be very, very aggressive in certain people that are, compromised one way or the other. But all of these stories can be viewed on our Twitter. They're, references from, mainstream media citations for the most part. And you can also check this out on our website, stfnreport.com. Be sure to bookmark our website. You never know when these pages will go black. Nazi photo album made from human skin of a death camp victim discovered. Tattoo, human hair, and bad smell. And of course, the Nazis were heavily into the occult. Everybody should check out that History Channel documentary, Hitler and the Occult. Follow the Nazi gold and you get to Washington, D.C. and the occult. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. But what they figured out is that it's easier to bring the gas chamber to the people than to try to bring people to the gas chamber. And, Nazis, socialists are always kind of like the same way. HSBC evacuated in London. And of course, once it gets in a building like this, it turns into, one of those diamond princesses, if you will, like that cruise ship. And now there's all sorts of cruise ships in limbo, parked, basically, in harbor. And, some have been let in, to infect, like that Jersey Shore cruise ship that had 4 confirmed cases on it. And, and then everybody was contaminated. But we'll keep moving on. The point of no return. Britain on the coronavirus brink as officials give up stopping the disease and focus on delaying its inevitable onslaught. What a choice of words. But that's basically the consensus. This thing is now basically going to do what it's programmed to do, which is to kill everyone. And, and then the people on television are like, just be sure to wash your hands. It's like, dude, did you get the memo? It's an airborne virus. Yeah, but wash your hands. How many times? 20 times a day. 20 seconds with hot water. And, they'll do that just to kind of, keep people busy. And again, give people like a false sense of security. And it's so terrible. I mean, to watch them, lie. And, if we could just kind of like bring back this video real quick. Not sure if that's going to happen.
Now, overnight, the government has faced fresh allegations of withholding information about the coronavirus after it was revealed that health officials will stop providing daily updates on the location of any new infections.
But with the known number of UK cases now standing at 90. Should we be doing more? And surely we have a right to know if there's an outbreak in our area.
Well, joining us now to answer those questions is the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Good morning, Prime Minister. Thank you for coming in today. You must be a very busy man at the moment. Are you withholding information?
No, not at all. Let me clear that up immediately, because it's very important that we are transparent. People understand that we're transparent. Public Health England needs to be absolutely sure about the diagnoses of these cases.
Now, the thing about these cult members, and pretty much all these people on TV are cult members, they love to lie to you. It's kind of like a game to them. Who can tell the biggest lie and get away with it? So everybody knows that they're lying to one another. But here it's a little different, because here the guy's, smirking and lying to you, but what he's lying about is the fact that everybody's basically been condemned. And, they're forced to kind of be polite and proper and accepting, of the propaganda, even though they try to, make an attempt to get some information, more information. But it's like, this is kind of like one of the morals of the story. When, lies are your religion, is that eventually they're going to tell you that, they're going to kill you, and you just have to sit there and kind of accept it. But anyways, let's get back into the news if we can. Point of no return. And it's like this everywhere now. And of course, they're coming on television as predicted, saying, we did everything we could, and we've got all these plans now, and it's going to take us time to ramp up, and it's going to take us forever to do all of these things. That could have been done literally like 2 months ago. They could have done like all of this, 2 months ago. But they didn't do it. And why didn't they do it, ladies and gentlemen? Because this is another 9/11, guaranteed. Question is, who's going to survive this thing? Probably the people that can afford the drugs to survive. But undoubtedly, some people have been given the vaccine already. You wouldn't release a thing like this without a vaccine hidden somewhere, an antidote. And so undoubtedly some people are sitting on it, but of course they'll deny it. It's came from the bats, But that's the worst part about this scenario, is right now somebody's sitting on a cure and they're just hoarding it for themselves. And, if you had to take a guess, who's sitting on the cure right now? And it's the people smirking at you, more than likely, So let's see if we can get back into the news stories. How's everybody doing out there? Does it get any better than this? I see a lot of people out there, in the audience, and they're like, yeah, another show. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even want to do these shows anymore. It's so bad now. It's like, what's left to say? What's left to say that we haven't said already, really? For those that have been watching this broadcast for years, this is now quite literally year 8 since, beginning this endeavor. But probably, a little less than that, as Stranger Than Fiction is. Gates spotted wearing a gas mask today. And I guess he was trying to be cute, like, just wash your hands. What are you afraid of? 5 more New York coronavirus cases. Just a few hours ago, it went from, just a handful to 11 to 22. And now there's, hundreds, thousands suspected officially. But the real story is that everybody was infected, starting mid-January to mid-February. Chances are everybody got dosed with it. And, the first round of it was like the flu. And then you might have thought, well, maybe you got the flu again. And, just lingers. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see, if the body is able to adapt to this virus eventually. Any case, more news. Congress has warned of a possible coronavirus exposure that may have occurred during an APAC conference. Memo revealed potentially exposed attendees who were in contact with an individual tested positive in New York prior to their travel to Washington, D.C. So look, chances are the entire command and control is going to go out, pretty much at around the same time. We just don't know when. And, especially, bureaucracies in big cities are just going to get wiped out. There's going to be so much viral load that, you're going to get wiped out. The only way to really survive this is like long-term isolation with all, the best medicines and oxygen and the best food and lots of rest and the like. But most people, living paycheck to paycheck are not going to be able to do that. And most people are going to, drop dead or succumb to, one of the outcomes of this virus. And what can you say? I'd like to be able to report something a little more fluffier, but I think people deserve to know what is going on, and that way, at least perhaps there's still something to be done. Instead of giving these people a blank check on television, you should prepare for the goon squads, because that's coming, and they're baby stepping us there. This perhaps is a breakdown of just what's going on out there in Seattle, right? Just one city that they know of. And of course, all of the confirmed cases that you're hearing about are the ones that have gone critical. Most of the cases you never hear about until they go critical. Now, what triggers a critical episode, I think is going to be a very interesting question. Whether it be stress, viral load, poor nutrition, fatigue, all of the above, and more. There's probably a lot of cofactors. And I think that the timing of the rollout of 5G is probably not coincidental. And undoubtedly, death towers have a huge impact on the pathogenesis of this disease. Disney World shut down, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the Disney dude stepped down. It's over. Everybody knows it's over. You've seen like all these people retire from television. They know it's over, right? They're going to enjoy their last few days. Destroys your nervous system, yet idiots compare this to the flu. So look, it attacks the nervous system, it attacks the circulatory system, it attacks the lungs, attacks the kidneys, and all you can do is just reduce your viral load. Get lots of pure organic cranberry juice, try and piss it out, lots of coffee, lots of water, and maintain your levels of vitamin C throughout the day, as well as magnesium. Try to get the magnesium without the calcium. I think that's an important angle. The magnesium acts as a calcium blocker. We can't really, say anything about anything really as far as what's going to work, but magnesium seems to be an essential thing for keeping your energy going throughout this disease. Otherwise, you just kind of drop dead. But there's also other things to look at. Anything that can boost your immune system probably isn't going to hurt. And so get it while you can. And it's now days away from the full lockdown, days away from before they declare a national emergency, and you're going to start seeing strategic placement of National Guard and quarantine zones and the like, and so it'll be real interesting to see how this evolves. to say the least, especially in the cities, with the food riots and the looting and the chaos. And this has basically been the attitude of this administration since this whole thing kicked off. They don't care about how many people die. They just care about their stock market and their rallies and the like. And it must pay pretty well to be president behind the scenes. 36-year-old man died in Wuhan from respiratory failure days after being discharged and given the all clear. And he passed all the tests. He didn't have a fever. And he passed 2 consecutive PCR tests, one after the other, one day after the other. So he's that's how they clinically give him the all clear. And 5 days later after that, boom. So of course cases are exploding. I mean, case numbers that are 12 hours old are already way outdated. They've already doubled officially. But again, unofficially, the numbers have been catastrophic since, a couple of weeks after the introduction of this virus to our shores. Here, a leading scientist in the UK says the coronavirus fight is lost. And it's funny because in this article, he's like, wow, they did everything they could. It was wonderful. And they really gave it a good fight. And, we did it, and it's just over, right? Like, like a Rocky, Balboa kind of, movie, right? And they didn't even swing a punch at this virus. Their tests failed. They didn't test anybody. They let everybody in. They're like, don't worry, just wash your hands. Don't get a mask. Now, if that's a fight, right, no doubt we lost, right? This was no Rocky Balboa fight, ladies and gentlemen. This was, I don't even know what you want to call it, but it was so rigged. It was so fake. It's bad. And to see, the media actually put out, articles, reports like this, I mean, it's kind of laughable. Don't ask me what the video guy is doing. Thousands are held on Grand Princess. So there was like, the Diamond Princess, and now there's the Grand Princess. It's all, it's all this new world order just laughing at you. Come on your cruise. Just think how happy they'll be, once everybody's eradicated and they can just, a billionaire can just take a cruise ship all to himself. Anyways, it's trying to dock in San Francisco. We say let it in. Let it into Sodom and Gomorrah, ladies and gentlemen. They're infected anyways. Might as well just quit playing around. Start talking about the solutions. But they just want to ease people into the bath, right? And just wait. In like a month, they'll start coming out with this stuff like, oh, they just discovered it. Just recently discovered, So this is tomorrow's news today. And undoubtedly we get trolls that come in. They're like, oh, we haven't seen, that just yet in the news. And it's because like, well, this is tomorrow's news today. You won't see it for a while. But yeah, often enough you'll get people like, oh, well, CNN didn't say that. It's like, man, the sheeple. It's kind of like a month ago when we were telling people, quite literally, you can look back in the video archives. A month ago, we were like telling people, get everything you can. Guns, ammo, everything. The end is near. And I'm sure there's people that stumbled upon it like, oh, look at this, look at this guy. Tinfoil hat and all that. I'll tell you what, I like my tinfoil hat. I like it. It keeps the EMF out. And as for the rest of the story, we'll just continue on with the news. California's first coronavirus fatality is an elderly patient. But, they put out these stories to make you think like, oh, it's just old people, right? But the videos that we've seen, right, maybe we should play some of these videos again. It's like, kids in the body bags, mass graves, everybody's, affected, dropping dead. It's, it's a world-ending virus. It's happening. This isn't like this isn't some kind of movie. It's actually happening right now. And I'm sure there's a lot of people laughing at the Chinese, when this was just happening to them. And, everybody was reporting numbers. Oh, 10,000, 100,000, maybe a million, And they could see all of that and laugh at that and not even think that this was going to blow back into our neighborhoods. And so we'll see, who's laughing now. And undoubtedly it'll be the Chinese who's pretty much laughing now, because they've locked everything down. They've buried everybody alive in their buildings. And so they've been able to, contain this somewhat. And, maybe, they'll lose 500 million people. They've got 1.5 billion, so they've got plenty of spare change left over. But no country is going to put in place the measures necessary to, even attempt to contain it. And now it's too late. These guys knew, what the schedule was. They knew what, how long they had before it was too late. And so they let it go far enough to incubate, to infect the world, but then they stopped it. Where the rest of the world, they're not going to even realize what's hit them until pretty much everybody's dead. And that's how this virus works. We'll finish up the news here real quick. It's been forever now. How's everybody doing out there? You guys liking this? Anybody use their diapers out there? We told people at the beginning of this broadcast, wear your diapers, because it doesn't get more. Oh, the video guy. Just when you try to add a little, cherry on top, the video guy comes in. He's like, haha, sabotage everywhere. 95-year-old nursing home student or resident has become the second person to die in Australia. It's, it's everywhere. And even in the southern hemisphere in the middle of summer. So if people think it's just going to go away with spring, no, that's the thing with this virus. That's the big surprise. It's never going away. And once people get infected, they're always infected. And they become like a ticking time bomb. So that's pretty much it for, the latest numbers. But, it's moving so quickly now as far as official reports that you can never really keep up. You can report a number and then 5 minutes later they're going to come back and be like, oh, it's doubled again. It's doubled again. It's doubled again. But, we figure that in 2 weeks, it's going to be like everybody's literally pissing themselves. And you want to avoid that with this virus, because that's a way of auto-infecting your respiratory tract. So you're going to have to be OCD on waste management. Every last drop, ladies and gentlemen. But, yeah, in 2 weeks' time, I doubt anybody will even remember these broadcasts in 2 weeks. It'll be such a panic, such a shitstorm. And I'd be really surprised if we're, still able to broadcast on air in 2 weeks. But you never know. You never know how this is all going to turn out. Of course, everybody should be saying their prayers and, hoping for the best out there. Undoubtedly, we're going to watch Sodom and Gomorrah burn, and there really isn't anything that anybody can do about it at this stage. They wanted to commit suicide, and they want to take you with them. So, we hope that you've been able to prepare, and we hope that, some people out there won't get infected, that some people out there will be able to, manage the disease and, ride this storm out. But for those that live in the city, you've got your work cut out for you. If you haven't prepared and you're just, you've got like a week's worth of groceries maybe, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's just, there's no words to, describe, that situation. And there really isn't any words that are going to make people feel better if they find themselves in that situation. My guess is that most of the people that'll be in that situation will probably be sheeple, But even though, their time has come, It doesn't make it any more pleasurable, really. And while it's, it's kind of important to state the fact that, Sodom and Gomorrah is burning. We know why it's burning. Nobody, is surprised by this. But it's, it doesn't really bring a smile to anybody's face, Not really. Again, it might be important to say, what this is. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a very miserable situation for, just about every libtard in America. And if they're not in the big city, they have to watch, their whole world implode on the television. And there's a lot of people that are just going to break down. We'll have to leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Till the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.